Our sixth and final type of migration, temporary migration, is once again going to be heavily economic based as far as the reasons for people moving, but there are some exceptions to that. For example, the snowbirds, who are temporary migrants, who are just migrating temporarily for the seasons that are changing, so typically going down in the winter and coming back sometime in spring. Those are temporary migrants. So there's several examples of ones that aren't for economic reasons, but mostly we'll just focus in on those that are related to what we call guest workers. So in some highly developed countries in Western Europe, even in the Middle East, what will happen is migrants are temporarily allowed access to a specific country, and they're there as guest workers. So that's to fill overwhelmingly labor shortages. And so essentially, because there's not enough people there to help fix with whatever jobs they need, so for example, construction, or in other cases, jobs that people don't want to do, less desirable tasks that the locals or the natives from Western Europe or Middle East don't want to do, then temporary is filled by people who are working part-time or temporarily. So those are guest workers. But still, one of the things is, why are these guest workers, why are they moving and not getting paid a lot? Why are they moving to get jobs that most people in those countries don't want? Is because it's still a better opportunity than it is back home. So it's a chance to earn more money. And so as you earn more money, you can then send that back home in the form of what they call remittances, which are essentially money sent back home to a population from those migrants who, in this case, have temporarily migrated to Middle East or Western Europe to serve as guest workers. And the most obvious way to showcase this is using, once again, population pyramids. We look at the net migration rate for the United Arab Emirates, a Middle Eastern country that's rapidly growing, rapidly developing. Economic-wise, I mean, it is through the roof. They're building skyscrapers left and right, resorts. It's a high-growth area. And so a lot of that's money from oil, in which they're trying to protect themselves by building amenities. So one example is they're building a ski slope that's indoors, just to showcase the amount of development that's going on here. And so what happens is there's a shortage for people working construction. And so the UAE's now got 89% of its population not from the UAE. And we can see that very, very clearly in the population pyramid, especially when we focus in the working age groups. So 20 to 50, you see a large number of males. And so that's to serve the short-term labor shortage from the lack of males that are living in a lightly populated part of the world, the United Arab Emirates. Because there's now demand for workers, that's filled with guest workers from mostly from South Asia, but also from Egypt, which I've mapped here. So UAE gets about 2.2 million Indians, so it's good. Its largest proportion of its migrants are coming from India, about 450 from Pakistan, and then about 161,000 from Sri Lanka, another good dose from Bangladesh, another good amount from Philippines, also sprinkle in some from Egypt, and you can understand why this population is now 89% non-native. So 89% of the population was not born in the UAE. And so once again, these are people that are moving here because they're trying to find jobs. And oftentimes they get there, the working conditions aren't too great. So that's why people don't want to oftentimes work in these jobs, because it's very, very poor working conditions. And so you'll see a lot of individuals who are dying from construction, from very unsafe construction practices. Also, you'll see a lot of these migrants who are kind of forced to all share, a bunch of men are supposed to share one room, one bathroom. And so you get these very, very poor living conditions and working conditions for those individuals, but who cares? They're making money, and that money is being sent back home, and it's improving the standard of living back in those home countries. Throughout much of Europe, you see a general pattern in which people are moving from Southern and Eastern Europe to Western and Northern Europe, and those are once again serving as guest workers. One example of this is in Norway, where because of the population structure, which I'll show here in a minute, because of the population structure, there's a shortage of nurses. Because we have such an older population that's aging, they're needing more and more health care. There's a shortage of nurses. There's a shortage of young people who are working in those particular occupations. Where you're going to find that supply of workers nearby Poland. So Poland, because in Poland people for the most part are happy, but they also would like to live somewhere else. They would like a better opportunity, and so thus you're seeing a migration of particularly women from Poland who are migrating to, in this case, Norway, to serve that kind of that shortage of hospital care, nursing care that you find throughout much of Scandinavia. And like I said, we can see that reflected in the population pyramids. More and more Norwegians are reaching an older age. Subsequently, we can see that in the net migration rate of 7, which is quite high. France is another one of these European countries that has a guest worker program, which is seeing a large number of workers who are coming to satisfy the shortage, particularly in lower wage, lower income types of jobs, to serve that shortage that we find here when we have a population pyramid. It's increasingly becoming more top-heavy. So in the case of France, it's seeing a large number of its migrants coming from northern Africa, from Libya, Algeria, other African countries that might have had a colonization era underneath the French rule. So they already speak French. And so all these reasons, along with the fact it's close by, explain why we see a large migration to France. And finally, Germany, which has a net migration rate. And so it's got a guest worker program from people from Turkey. And so you'll see a large number of actually Turkish people, and that's because they're guest workers. They're serving because there's a shortage of workers in all those various types of industries I've mentioned beforehand, low wage, cheaper, easier jobs that people don't want to do in Germany are being filled by Turkish individuals who are migrating there. And all of these is creating conflict. All of these are creating changes. And so you're seeing various new rules, new laws, kind of what to do with these new immigrants. And this is something that Europe is going to continue to face throughout our lifetime. With this shortage of individuals, especially younger individuals, they're going to find more demand for migrants. Well, what if those migrants don't adhere to the policies or the rules or the governmental laws in those new countries, those countries in Western Europe and the Middle East? This is to be determined. Of course, Hispanics, not only are they a good example of chain migration, but also because of them working largely agricultural or working more in rural areas, or tend to be a little bit more on the move. And so temporary migration kind of as the seasons change. And so during the springtime, maybe go to places that need seeding and planting, whereas during the winter time or the fall, go to places that we're seeing the harvest, or where there's a shortage of people to work in the harvest. And so it's very much temporary migration that you see throughout much of the United States from Hispanics serving mostly agricultural jobs.